we'll start the last topic of PYQ discussion for mains, and the topics that we'll be covering today is policies, infrastructure, industries, taxation and budgeting. And in this section we'll see some of those applied economics topics. So we have covered first the foundational part, the macroeconomy part, resource mobilization, inclusive growth in the first discussion. In the second session we discussed about agroeconomy in detail, and within that we also covered the food processing industry as well as the land reforms. And today that would be the last. It would be inclusive of all those topics wherein UPSC has been asking some of those questions which are more contemporary in nature, be it the infrastructure, be it the energy infrastructure, be it the investment models. There are different questions, so that is why this is more, you can say, quite comprehensive as well as diverse in those topics. Okay. So first we'll talk about the first question. So the first question is, distinguish between capital budget and revenue budget. Explain the components of both these types of budgets. A basic, most basic question. So budget, it is revenue budget and capital budget. Within those revenue there is one receipts, other is expenditure. Similarly for capital, receipts, expenditure. Within the revenue receipts, it could be tax, non-tax. Within the capital receipt, it could be debt creating, non-debt creating. Within the expenditure, there is no consumptive expenditure. Under this, first is capital outlay and second is repayment of loans. So this is the whole idea behind different types of the different components of budget. So budget is the estimate of upcoming estimate of revenue as well as receipts and expenditure of the government of India for the upcoming financial year, obviously as per Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, that is to be presented before Parliament and taken approval for all those expenditure to be done in the upcoming financial year. That is there. Then the budget is of two types. Budget components are revenue budget, all those things which include the consumptive part, day-to-day expenditure, and does not reflect any changes in asset and liability. That is a part of revenue budget. And in the capital budget, it changes it is concerned with changes in assets and liabilities for the government of India. Okay, and this revenue budget is day-to-day consumptive and recurring. In nature. This is related to productive part and ensuring multiplier effects in the economy. In the tax part, receipt part, it could be direct taxes. Example, IT tax, income tax, corporate tax, and it could be indirect tax. Example could be GST. In the non-tax revenue, it could be dividend, profit, it could be spectrum sale, surplus by RBI, etc. License fees. In the capital debt creating receipts, loans, debts raised, and non-debt creating disinvestments. Capital outlay, infra spending, and repayment of loan, principal part. So interest part, dividend, profit and interest. If interest is received on loans, that is revenue receipt, but if the principal payment is received or it is paid, it is related to the capital budget. So this is the whole idea behind the budget. Okay. Now coming to the next question. So next question says, why is public private partnership required in infrastructure project? So what is PPP? When private players are onboarded for financing and development of public infrastructure project. So private player is onboarded, they are also collaborated together. Why is it needed? For financing or to access private finance for infra. Second, instill professionalism in project completion. Third, ensuring resource efficiency. Because they will be working for profits and obviously they will try to minimize their losses and maximize the output. And fourth, risk sharing between government and sector, basically risk to reward. Interplay. Okay. So these are the main reasons. First is to access private finance or infrastructure. So technically, if any infrastructure has to be built, if that is public infrastructure, that the government is expected to actually come out with the finance. They should actually allocate the money from the budgetary allocation, or the government should take the debt. However, there could be another way wherein the private player is also onboarded. They are actually incentivized. They are nudged to invest, to put money in those infrastructural project in return of certain return on investment or profits, and that is how they are onboarded. Second is instill professionalism in project completion. For timely execution of project, for timely completion of project, if the government entity is only left with, we know that there is certain levels of delay and red tapeism whenever the government entity works in any of those projects. But when private entity comes into picture, they technically do not try to make sure that they adhere to all the rules, rather they are more inclined towards making sure that the project is complete in a more professional manner. Whatsoever is the time limit, the deadlines are met. Even if the deadlines are not met, they try to the private players try to compensate for it in terms of the fines that they pay to the government. So that in a way instills professionalism in the work. Third, resource efficiency. See, the whole idea behind project completion, if the private player is doing these projects, is profit generation. And for profit generation, obviously what the private player would do, they will try to maximize the whatsoever resources are there. If they have deployed their machineries, they will try to make sure that the machineries are being used for maximum number of times, rather than those machinery kept idle and the rental and all those downtime is reduced. And the second is the labor, whosoever are working on those projects, they are ensured that they work to the fullest. The monitoring system is quite efficient, the supervisory function is quite efficient, they are paid overtime so that the project is completed within the stipulated time. And last is risk sharing. We know that the infrastructure project is a risky project because the gestation period and the time, the duration for completion generally takes say 3 or 4 or even more than 5 years. So in the meantime, if the government is taking all the risk, what would happen that the budget of the government would be under strain. But if the private player also comes up with its own money, obviously the risks are shared. So the risks about completion, risks about the profit maximization is not just incumbent on the government, but it's all about the private player also to come and say that okay, we are taking the risk. If they are demanding higher return on the investment, they are well able to take that proportionate amount of risks associated with the project. Okay. So this is the idea. And the second is redevelopment. Examine the role of PPP model in redevelopment of railway station. Redevelopment of railway station. So land acquisition, rail operations. This is done by the government. However, the private player passenger amenities, or you cannot the passenger, I would say that the amenities on rail platform, commercialization of rail space, realization of station premise. So it improves the passenger amenities. There are different lounges which have opened on railway stations, all because of the land which is being leased, or the space has been leased by the Ministry of Railways or the Indian Railways to the private player. Like we see these things on DMRC, the Delhi Metro, all the stations will find out that there are different outlets, food outlets and all these things. These are the spaces which have been allotted by the Delhi Metro Rail Corporation through bidding to the private players. In the same manner, these facilities are being extended. There are provisions for different levels of lounges which are available. The retiring rooms have been privatized, and that ensures better amenities. However, the negative flip side is obviously when the private player comes into picture, it's all about the profit maximization. The costs have gone up. The facilities, if they are top notch, obviously that comes with a cost, and majority of the people who are actually the frequent users of Indian Railways may not be able to actually afford those costs. So in a way, those facilities are underutilized rather than these being offered to the masses. So if the private player comes up with this, the facilities would be best in class, but that would be coming with a added cost. So despite all these things, there is a constant push by the government to ensure that the core operations of the railway stations are being managed by the government. For example, under the Amrit Bharat Station Scheme. Amrit Bharat Station Scheme, the government of India is modernizing the railway stations. The railway platforms are being modernized. There are a number of platforms which have been extended. but the commercial spaces which would be created would be leased to the private players so that they can open their outlets, and those railway stations would function as a multi-purpose options that would be more like a mall wherein the railways operations are being operated at the ground levels. So, they would create multiple levels that would facilitate convention center, that would facilitate even the retail spaces would be opened in those station premises. So, this is all about the privatization. Positive is obviously passenger amenities, best in class facilities, people moving towards railways, adopting not just to go quicker, but also to have those experiences while traveling. The same thing you can associate with airports. Whenever one goes to board a flight in those top notch airports, we will find out that these airports are more so like best in class malls. So, people get those facilities, however the costs are very high. Okay. So, it may lead to class segregation where people, the middle classes, may not be able to afford those things. Okay. Now, coming to the third question. Now, what is the need for expanding regional air connectivity in India? Obviously, this question came up in discussed the government Udan scheme and its achievement. This came in 2024, last year's mains. So, obviously, the need for expanding regional connectivity. First is improved connectivity in small towns, growth of business opportunities in emerging regions. Third, fast paced and regionally balanced urbanization. Facilitate hub and spoke model. Hub and spoke model of interlinked urbanization between mega cities and smaller towns. And fifth, expand the scope of tourism. So, these are the main reasons behind why regional connectivity scheme has been associated. There have been many more airports and many routes which have been successfully bid, and many of the airports have been seeing many we can say a very positive response in terms of the total number of flights which are actually moving from these airports. So, it's improved connectivity in smaller towns. Obviously, most of the people who work in larger cities, these tier 1 metro cities, they always try to go to their hometowns. But because of the railways, the delays which are associated with railways, and it takes so much time to go travel to the hometown, it becomes very difficult to frequently visit the hometowns. However, if regional air flight connectivity is there, obviously the frequency of visit would become higher, and that would actually lead to better connectivity. People would be more integrated with their hometowns. Second, it would lead to growth opportunities, business opportunities in hometowns, in smaller towns. So, we have been witnessing that many of those big brands, they have also gone to those places where newer airports have come in The big malls and all these things are also coming out there because the rental costs are lower, and there is a huge propensity to actually consume those items which are more urbanized in sense, like fast fashion, restaurants and all these things. These all are non discretionary service consumption. So this is picking up in smaller towns. Then the product visibility, we have been witnessing that the Shark Tank India, many of those products, they are now becoming visible. Viable markets and startups are also getting founded there. It's all because the regional connectivity is leading to faster connectivity. Then fast paced and regionally balanced urbanization. So we have seen that urban islands have been created where the various fewer pockets, specifically in southern region and western region, there have been many more urban centers which have developed. However, with regional connectivity scheme, new towns, new areas are being developed even in traditionally backward regions of Mithila in Bihar, even in some of the regions of Odisha to as far as northeast. The urbanization is now becoming more balanced. Then facilitate hub and spoke model of interlinked urbanization. So what is being done, that urban centers, the tier 1 centers would facilitate like a hub wherein the big business would be, I can say, they would be processed from those bigger centers, but they will have connectivity with the smaller towns. In a way, the businesses can be expanded to smaller towns to exploit the cheap labor and availability of resources in those areas and expand the scope of food tourism. There is an idea that we should expand the scope of tourism, basically thematic tourism, unfolding all those mysteries which are associated with smaller towns, rather than just only congesting the already burdened tourist spots like Agra or Jaipur and all in south. If these towns, smaller towns also get air connectivity, then there is a huge higher likelihood of people visiting those areas and boosting the local economy there. Tourism has this potential of generating employment as well as boosting local economy. So this is the idea behind why there is a need for expanding regional connectivity. So now talking about the UDAN scheme. UDAN scheme is, it's a VGF, by viability gap funding based regional connectivity scheme. Viability gap funding of rupees 2500 per hour of flight. This is the ticket, whatsoever would be the ticket would be borne by the government. There would be route monopolization for 3 years for successful bid. To add to that, there's a project about again developing those helipads and all these things also, and developing smaller planes and smaller airstrips specifically for leveraging the cargo operations from those areas. So this is the idea behind UDAN scheme. So currently we have 157 airports. It has expanded from 74 airports in 2014 to 157 airports. The government has a target of developing 220 or 230 airports by 2047. So technically we will have 220 to 250 airports by 2047. Technically every 2-3 districts, adjoining 2-3 districts would have one airport nearby, so that the connectivity gets improved. So explain the meaning of investment in an economy in terms of capital formation. So first, obviously, GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So C is consumption, I is investment. G is government consumption. This is private consumption. And this is net exports. So meaning of investment. Investment refers to tangible creation of capital tangible or intangible. In the economy to ensure income generation. In successive years. It is also known as multiplier effects in the economy. So known as multiplier effects So what happens that any economy needs to generate income, but to generate income we need to first create assets, create those infrastructure, create those human skill sets, create those social capital. All these generate accumulation of capital, all this formation of capital is nothing but investment, the money which is spent for creation of these things, be it the roads, bridges, be it skilling, education, be it ensuring that the community improves, the overall acumen level improves. All these things are tangible or intangible capital formation only. Improving the capabilities of humans or improving the infrastructure, be it the physical infrastructure, road, bridges, or be it the energy infrastructure. All these taken together is known as investment, because that adds up to the value in the economy in terms of further rounds of income generation. It would create jobs, it would lead to faster, many more economic opportunities getting created. Now, if we talk about, discuss the factor to be considered while designing concession agreement between a public entity and a private entity. Factors to be considered. First, traffic volumes. How much, if the infrastructure project is being created, what is the revenue projection? What is the traffic which would be using, be it the electricity consumption, be it the highways, the toll collection, that is the traffic volume. Second, project completion duration. Third, the cost of capital. Fourth, the cost of capital. Second is duration of project. So what is the duration of project, how likely is it to be completed within stipulated time? All these things are very important. Then cost of capital, what is the money, what is the charge, what is the loan rates, the rate of credits in the economy, because depending on that the return on investment would be calculated by the player, the private player who is eager to invest in the project. And last, factors to be generated, multiplier effects in the economy. This is known as project viability. If a private player is coming out with its finance, the concession agreement, how much should be the duration would be dependent on how much is the multiplier effect in the economy, whether that road, if it is private funded, is it leading to many more infrastructure, many more economic activities which are being started, which are being opened up alongside the road. So this is also important to be considered while framing the concession agreement between the private player and a government entity, as to how many, up to how many years the right to collect those revenues should fall to the particular private entities. So this is how you could have completed this particular question. Okay. Now, what are smart cities? So obviously the question is related to smart cities. So what are smart cities? They are smart urban infrastructure which is developed to improve the ease of living and align urbanization to 21st century developmental needs. So the idea is, in 21st century obviously it's all about automation, it's all about intelligent transportation system, it's all about how the density, urban road density would improve, that the smart storm drainage facilities would improve. In a way, the quality of life of those who are living in these urban areas, they should improve. That is smart cities. So 100 cities were selected with budget of rupees 50,000 crore. So many projects have been taken up, many projects have been completed in those cities which were chosen in the list of 100 smart cities. So that was the main idea behind smart cities. It's all about retrofitting and refurbishing. Retrofitting and refurbishing of existing cities, not developing cities from scratch, existing cities which are more choked up, congested, the road widening projects, CCTV installation, creation of those vending zones wherein the market, like street vendors market, would be created. All these things, parking spaces and all these things are to be developed under the smart cities mission. So examine their relevance for urban development in India. Obviously relevance, balanced urbanization, decongestion, third, improving the quality of life, and fourth is alignment with 21st century developments. Give arguments for smart villages. It will arrest distressed migration. So people in rural areas, if they get facilities like smart urban areas, the facilities at in their home villages, they will try not to move because of distress situation. Job opportunities and economic activities. So this is another idea. Third would be sustainable urbanization. Which is the ethos behind the UN Habitat. UN Habitat promotes sustainable urbanization. And fourth, stopping the growth of urban sprawls. What are urban sprawls? What happens that in core area, in urban areas, you'll find out that there is core urbanized regions, and along the peripheries there are different urban areas, different pockets of development which are more haphazard in nature. They have got developed. For example, in Delhi, if you talk about, there is in Bhavana regions, in Narela regions, there are different regions wherein haphazard urbanization has happened. These areas themselves considered to be an urban center, however, they lack those facilities to be considered as urban centers, and then the facilities are not so great, and it leads to misutilization of land. The land use efficiencies reduce. So, this is the idea behind reduction of urban sprawls. So, this is the idea. So, Pura and Smart and Rubber Mission, it talked about ensuring that the urban facilities should be extended to urban rural areas also, and so that there is a contiguous urbanization right from urban areas till to the rural centers. So, this is the idea behind smart villages. Now, coming to the energy infrastructure question. So, do you think India would be able to meet say 50% of its target of renewable energy by 2030? So, India has committed 500 gigawatt of non-fossil based electricity and 50% of energy needs coming from renewable sector. Sources. Yes, they will achieve, because the rate of adoption of solar is good. Is about per year. There is a renewed push towards hydel power. Then nuclear energy is being pushed. So, India expect to create more than 35 to 40 gigawatt of nuclear energy by 2030 and up to 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy by 2047. Challenges: slow down in adoption of wind energy. So, wind energy has been around 50 gigawatt. So, it has improved from 46 gigawatt to 50 gigawatt in the last 10 years. However, the solars have improved from 10 gigawatt to round about 105 gigawatt. So, there is an increase of more than 10 times in solar energy, but the same has not been seen, even not a fraction of it has been experienced in the wind energy. Second, challenges in indigenous manufacturing. Of renewable energy components. Third, grid integration is a challenge. Fossil based electricity. And fourth, intermittent nature of renewable so this is one of the other ideas. However, and also there is a slowdown in adoption of rooftop solar power also. There is a slowdown. The government has come out with Pradhan Mantri Surya Muft Ghar Bijli Yojana. Then how will shift of subsidies from fossils to renewables help achieve this target? So technically the government of India gives huge subsidies in terms of tax expenditure. Currently Saudi Aramco is being promoted. They are being incentivized to come and set up their refineries in India. They have collaborated with Reliance Petroleum. Similarly, there is an active push towards subsidizing the LNG terminal operations, liquefied natural gas terminal operations, or extraction of natural gases. All these are fossil based electricity itself, fossil based energy sources itself. And technically what they do, that they actually make these products more feasible in terms of the affordability. If the same money goes to renewable energy in terms of incentivizing domestic production, second incentivizing adoption of renewable energy, then obviously that would create market based mechanism. The prices would be dealt as of the demand and supply which would be interacting in the market, and that would mean people or the producers and consumers, they would be more incentivized, they would be more inclined in adopting and switching from fossils towards renewable energy. One classic example has been the net metering, wherein if you are producing solar energy through rooftop solar and you are not requiring it, then you can release that energy into the grid. Then you are positive, you are actually releasing energy, releasing electricity, and you will be compensated for this, and that is what net metering is all about. If you are consuming it, the meter would be added. If you are leaving it, the meter would go down, and whatsoever is the net value, you will be required to pay for that. Okay. So this is how renewable energy certificates are being traded. If you are using renewable energy under power purchase agreements, there is an obligation for distribution companies, power distribution companies like BSES, Adani Power or Reliance Power. There is a legal obligations under the Electricity Act itself to purchase some of those demand of electricity from renewable sources. So all these things are important if there is a shift towards subsidies from fossils towards the renewable energy sector. Now coming to the 7th question. So the 7th question talks about to what factors can the recent dramatic fall in equipment cost and tariff of solar energy be attributed to? Reasons for dramatic fall. First, intense bidding among private players. For solar farms projects. Second, fall in production cost of PV modules. Third, overcapacity in China. For and also domestic manufacturing. Solar cells. So dumping in India. And fifth, active adoption of solar rooftop. So that is demand boost. So these are the factors. First, intense bidding. So what is happening that the government is coming out with the targets to set up these many solar farms and all these things. So that leads to bidding, and whenever there is bidding, obviously that leads to bidding war and bidding competition and the tariff costs going down. Then obviously third is fall in production cost of PV modules as well as electricity which are getting generated because of economy of scale. Earlier only fewer solar parks were there, so obviously the consumption of solar modules were not so high because they were not installing solar farms. But with renewed demand of solar farms, there is a huge demand for solar PV modules, photovoltaic modules, and that is what is leading to cheaper production cost. Second, there is also active energy, the electricity which is getting generated through solar cells, it is now becoming substantial. For example, out of 100 gigawatt which is generated, the generated capacities, 10%, 10 gigawatt comes from solar. Around about 10 gigawatt is coming from solar. So in that way, solar electricity is actually giving certain electricity, and that is generating demand for solar based electricity. Third is overcapacity in China. So China is now slowing down. We know that the solar PV module manufacturing units, they are actually churning out PV modules. However, the demand for solar power is now tapering. Although it peaked in 2021, it is tapering down, and that is why they are now dumping these products at a throwaway prices in India. Fourth, active adoption of solar rooftop system. So what the consumers are coming out with because of active advertisement campaigns, awareness campaigns by the government, and also International Indian Renewable Energy Development Authority, IREDA, the National Institute of Solar Energy, all these agencies are promoting solar rooftop installation. To add to that, there are different government schemes which are subsidizing those initial investment costs, and the longevity which is roughly 25 to 30 years. So the break even reaches in say 3-4 years. After 3-4 years, the total costs are recovered, and after that you are generating electricity free of cost. So these are the campaigns that are actually leading to push factors among people, the citizens, for rapid adoption of rooftop solar. So this is one more thing. What implication does the trend have for the thermal power plants producers? So obviously competition, and they will be compelled to improve carbon emissions from thermal power plants. Third, they will try to enter renewable energy. Segment. For example, NTPC Greens have been created as a standalone company which is a subsidiary of NTPC to actually foray into renewable energy sectors. And then obviously there would be more choices for consumers. They will likely shift towards renewables, and that would compel those thermal power projects to switch towards clean energy sources. Okay, so this is the idea behind the 7th question. So explain the rationale behind the GST Compensation to States Act of 2017. So the rationale was to ensure that post implementation of GST there will not be any revenue shortfall. To state governments. First is this: ensuring growth in revenue at 14% yearly for state. So they have been onboarded based on these premises that there won't be any revenue shortfall. Second, there would be 14% year on year increase. If they are not met, then the money would be flown, money would move from the GST compensation cess to those states which are experiencing these shortfall, and also compensate the producer states. So producer states means Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, then Haryana. Many of these states are producer states, but GST is destination based tax, which is taxed based on consumption. So whichsoever state has higher consumption, they would be able to collect more taxes through GST. And GST compensation cess would create a win-win situation where the tax mobilization would increase for the consumption state like laggard states of UP, Bihar and Jharkhand. However, the states which are producing, they will not be disheartened, rather they will also get certain boost that even if there is revenue shortfall, the central government would be pushing the money through a constitutional obligation under the GST cess. So it puts constitutional obligation. On the union government. So union government is under the constitutional obligation to ensure this money should flow to the state governments. Okay. So the question is how GST COVID has impacted the GST compensation fund. COVID impact. Less cess collection due to demand collapse of sin goods and webland goods. So GST compensation cess is only applied on those products which are sin goods, basically which have negative externalities for the society as well as the environment. Second, it is implemented on those goods which attract 28% GST. So if the GST is 28% on some of those products, GST compensation cess is also slapped on those things. So if there was COVID, there was demand slowdown. Second, there was export, there was actually production vulnerability, and all that led to lower GST compensation cess collection. And to add to that, there were many state governments which experienced shortfall, so that created a federal tension between the center and the state, that the states wanted a higher compensation from the state, from the central government, and easy disposal of those grievances. However, the state central government themselves experienced the GST cess collections shortfall, so that led to those tensions about delay in money which is flowing to the sector, which is flowing to the state governments. एक पानी का बोल दीजिए ना, पानी रखा हुआ है ठीक. Ninth question, comment on the important changes introduced in respect of the long term capital gains tax and dividend distribution tax in the union budget 2018-19. So in 28 budget 2018-19, 2018-19, two things was created. First, long term capital gains tax on equity and related financial products. So for the first time, rather than only capital gains tax being imposed on physical properties or debt like FDs and all these things, even the equity segment attracted capital gains tax for any capital gains over and above rupees 1 lakh of those equity products, be it the mutual fund, be it the direct share. So this was given, so 10% capital gains tax was imposed. Second, there was abolishment of dividend distribution tax. So the idea was dividend distribution tax was attracting 15% dividend, 15% taxation. So what the companies used to do, the founders did not used to ask for any income, rather they wanted shares through profits. So whatsoever is the distributed profit is known as dividend. So likewise the under the heads of profit receipt, they used to pay only 15% taxation. So it has been scrapped because that led to anomaly wherein people at the top ends, they were not ready to take income because they had attracted 30% tax slab, and over and above that there is a surcharge also. So this was abolished, and now whatsoever is the income from different sources, be it the rental income, be it income from the dividend and all these things, they are considered to be income as total, and then they are taxed. So what is the rationale behind this? Rationale, first, ensuring parity in different asset classes. So irrespective of the type of asset class, if that is a long term, that would attract a simple 10% of the capital gains or whatsoever is that there. Then discourage over financialization of economy. And third, reduce speculation driven transactions, wherein people just enter just to gain from it rather than knowing the product itself. Over financialization of economy means people are moving their funds towards financial products rather than in real investments like building, construction and all these things. That is also not good for the economy, because any share prices are reflective of real economic activity which is going on the ground. If the companies are not making profit, if their products are not selling, if they are not generating profits, the share prices are bound to go down. Technically, even if they are rising, that it creates a bubble, that creates a flawed system that may lead to more losses. And the parity means the assets of different classes would be treated at par. That is the rationale behind this. And third, last, what is the rationale behind DDT? It ensures the tax on income, profits or interest is treated at parity. Not only the salary income but also from other sources. Income from other sources are treated as income generation, and that has to be taxed under the Income Tax Act. So that was the whole idea behind the long term capital gains tax, which was imposed in 2018-19 budget. So how globalization has led to the reduction of employment in the formal sector of the Indian economy? Is increased informalization detrimental to the development of the country? Comment. So first, globalization led informalization. More competition leading to cost reduction through informalization. Second, MNCs are directly entering the markets of India thus reducing profit margins for formal enterprises. And third, informal sector has been able to create a permanent demand of first copy market. So what is being done, that the informal sectors have got those exposure through various globalization. Now they are directly creating those products, even in the restaurants, because many of those people, they have got trained under many of those big food joints like KFC, or you talk about Domino's, Pizza Hut. Now they are opening their own stores. They are creating those informal vendor systems and selling those things on road stalls. Second, because of the cutthroat competitions, as these globalized MNCs, they operate at higher economy of scale. They are creating products at a very lower cost, and that is squeezing the margins, and many formal domestic enterprises are not able to match it, and they are going informal to reduce the cost. And third, because there is improved competition, there are more products which are available in the market, and that is why the costs have gone down. However, these things are leading India's economy towards informalization to maintain their existence in the market. Is increased for informalization detrimental to the development of economy? Yes. Negative impact of informalization on Indian economy. To India's development. Promoting poverty trap, they can vulnerability in vulnerability in jobs because they are informal. एक ही है, एक बॉटल एक ही है, नहीं है, पानी खत्म. Vulnerability in jobs because they are not getting any social security. Obviously they are not getting any social security, so there is a huge issues related to jobs. Third, low skill, low wage spiral is created. What happens that people are inclined towards getting those preferring those low skilled jobs because the jobs are not offering them good wages. It is all being because of increased informalization in the economy and persistent economic slowdown. And last is less tax mobilization for government. So what happens that since the economy is more informal, obviously they are working, they are just surviving, and once they are surviving, they are not improving on their quality. The value addition in the economy is not happening at a greater scale. Just giving you an example, in India, because of higher demand of automobiles, even the quality of automobiles have also improved, because now people are purchasing relatively expensive automobiles. They are not going towards 3 lakh, 4 lakh or 5 lakh cars. They are at least spending 9 to 10 lakh rupees. So in that way the quality of automobiles have improved, and that has actually improved the viability of automobile companies. So if the purchase is more there in high value products, the survival of formal economy is higher. But since there is more competition in many of those services oriented economy, many of these in areas where globalized, many global value chains, global brands are working, the costs have to be minimized to match those markets, and that is leading to poor or substandard quality which is getting pushed, and that is also leading to lower economic growth. Last is, since most of the informal economy works under the radar of the government, so the tax collection which actually should happen does not happen at that pace, and that leads to lower money at the disposal of the government for other welfare measures. They can use that money for skill development and other poverty alleviation programs, which does not happen. Eleventh is, faster economic growth requires an increased share of manufacturing sector in GDP, particularly MSMEs. Comment on the present policies of the government in this regard. Okay. So, in the last 25 years, the share of manufacturing in overall GDP has stagnated between 15 to 17%. So, need to increase the share. MFG, manufacturing in GDP. Why? Because it adds more value addition in the economy. Creation of higher skilled jobs and absorbing excess farm labor. An absorption of excess farm labor. Okay. Then third, obviously the third issue, a third positive thing is creation of sustainable urbanization, because industrialization backed urbanization is a better mode, because the purchasing power is better in those industrial towns. And fourth, supports further deepening of service sector. Because if manufacturing sector gets a boost, the other associated service sector like transportation, logistics, banking, other legal facilities, even those people who are actually working in those areas, they will demand housing, they will demand schools, hospitals and all these things, and in that way the service sector would get a boost. Role of MSME. First, higher share in exports of manufactured products. So, it is roughly 50% of all those manufactured products comes from MSMEs. Then development of ancillary industries. Example, auto component industry supporting large automobile companies. regionally balanced industrialization. Cost effective manufacturing. Cost effective manufacturing. So first is higher share in exports of manufactured products. So MSMEs create India, if India exports most of the products, if suppose India exports 100 units of manufactured products, 50% comes from MSMEs. India has also India houses most of those vendors which are catering to global manufacturing giants, be it the steel giants, be it the automobile, many other giants. Second, it also creates development of ancillary industries, those auto components and many of these industries which supplies components to a big original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, they get a boost because the chain of industries get created. Then regionally balanced industrialization. See, these MSMEs, they are spread all over India, and because of this the manufacturing sector does not get concentrated to the coastal regions itself. MSMEs also push manufacturing opportunities in those tier 3 towns, even to the village areas also in some of the remotest part of the country. And cost effective manufacturing. MSMEs try to reduce the cost because some of these things are shared, and they try to largely bypass most of those stringent laws which actually leads to more costs in terms of the cost of production. MSMEs tries to ensure that the products become more affordable, and that is how the manufacturing can improve its share from 15 to 70% currently to 25%, which has been envisaged under the National Manufacturing Mission, which has been recently released. Then comment on the present policies of the government. So the present policies of the government is first ensuring that the working capital is ensured through the various schemes like PM Mudra Yojana, then credit guarantee scheme for MSME. Then the government also has interest subvention to arrange for capital needs, be it the fixed capital or working capital. Then they have delayed payments, trades for trade receivable discounting system of Reserve Bank of India, wherein the MSMEs can actually get their bills at a discount. They can generate the cash flows immediately. Then we have MSME Samadhan as a portal for grievance redressal. However, the thing that is, since the question is all about commenting on it, the thing that is lacking is MSMEs need to become more formal. In India, most of the MSMEs work like informal agencies. They try to remain small. This is known as Peter Pan syndrome, where the MSMEs do not want to grow, although they have the potential to grow in case of manufacturing, but they deliberately do not want to grow because they will become large and they will come under the scrutiny of the government. So they try to remain within the small bracket so that they can avail those government facilities. Second, they do not want to improve the technology skills because they need capital. So that is why there is an active integration with the MSME, the small industries model of the Germany, the Mittelstand model. Mittelstand is one of the cities in Germany which is known for small scale industries. So there is an active collaboration, technology, vocational education and training, TVET model, a collaboration between India and Germany so as to leverage this MSME. So these are the aspects of MSME and manufacturing sector. Twelfth question is, industrial growth rate has lagged behind the overall growth rate of GDP in the post-reform period. Yeah. So lagging growth rate. So technically the growth rate, industrial growth rate has been in the range of 5 to 6% industrial growth rate, but the GDP has been growing at 7% average. The reasons are high or large entry barrier. industrial sector, lack of integration with global value chains, skill deficiency, fourth, more focus on basic industries rather than heavy capital goods or emerging areas. So first is there is an entry barrier because industrialization needs huge capital, so that is why it is just limited to few business houses. In India, industrialists are technically 15 to 20 business houses of India, or the family businesses of India actually hold the overall industrial landscape of India, be it different, the Tatas, Birlas or the Reddy's in terms of pharmaceuticals. You talk about FMCGs, there are few 15 to 20, I guess 20 or 25 houses are there which families which are running the industrial sector, all because that needs huge capital. And it requires the government of India's push. They should give certain support, like land at a very cheaper rate, subsidized rate, ensuring capital, access to capital, so that this industrialization is more democratized. This is becoming a challenge. The same thing is not the case in case of service sector. Service sector has a very small entry barrier. You can start services in a small room with 2 or 3 skilled people. They can start a business. That is how many of those big Microsofts, Google, of late Swiggy, Zomato, they have been created. It's all because these sectors, service sector requires very small amount of capital. Second, lack of integration with global value chains. We have not been known for creating products which India should be looked at. That okay, if you want to source say transformers, you need to get it from China or South Korea. If you need to get semiconductors, you need to get it from Taiwan. If you want to get deep technology, be it manufacturing, deep tech, you need to go to Germany. So these cutting edge technologies or the things which are more so needed in case of manufacturing sector or in the industrial sector, India has never been integrated with these global value chains, that okay, some of these parts should be produced in India. So that is why India has been largely importer of high end manufactured products or the industrial products. Then skill deficiency. As there has been the case that the people who are skilled, technically skilled to work in those industrial sector, that is less. Even the State of Working India report by Azim Premji University in 2023, it highlighted that most of the graduates which are coming out of engineering colleges are highly unemployable because there is a disconnect between industry and academia. Whatever they have learned, whatsoever skill that they have acquired in their engineering graduation days, that is non-relevant, that has become obsolete as far as the industrial demands is concerned. Then more focus on basic industries. So India has been focusing on developing those ancillary component based manufacturing rather than creating original equipment manufacturing, original automobile company like things. Apart from automobile and pharma, India has not been able to create those brands for which India should be known for in other industrial landscapes. So that is why India needs to produce those final value added products rather than intermediate goods, basic goods. They should move towards manufacturing of capital goods, those tunnel machines, those big transformers and all these things, semiconductor businesses. So this is how industrial growth would pick up. Similarly, they should improve the logistics sector, because if logistics and the cost of logistics goes down, that would automatically entice many of those global companies to set up their businesses in India. For example, Apple has shifted most of its production of iPhones to India, all because of favorable positions or favorable incentives which have been offered by the government. How far the recent changes in industrial policies are capable of increasing the industrial growth? So Make in India was the aims at sufficiency in manufacturing. Can it be achieved? Yes, because Government of India giving capital subsidies. Renewed push towards industrial corridors. Third, huge infra spending. So all these are leading to the feeling that okay, India can improve its share in manufacturing of in the industrial growth sector, in the industrial sector, but there are certain limitations. The pace of skilling is not improving. First, the per capita income, because industrial products are generally discretionary in nature because they are not essential in essence. So it has to be improvement in the domestic demand of these industrial products that would add up to the sustainable development of industries in India. For example, many steel plants got operated in China, the cement factories got created, and China became the largest manufacturing of steel and iron, all because there was huge demand of these products in China, because housing sector, the real estate sector and the infrastructure development of the Chinese government happened at an unprecedented rate. So it has to come from the domestic demand first, then only industrial landscape would improve. However, the Government of India has come out with many incentives to improve these things, for like the recent National Manufacturing Mission which has been announced. Okay. So this was all about the discussion related to the questions which have been asked in previous years related to all these topics. So in these topics you need to go more revise about the industries and manufacturing sector. Second, you need to see MSMEs, infra and energy, and fourth, you need to see the investment models. The sources should be budget, economic survey and finance newspaper or app. So this is how you can create all these background and keep trying solving those questions. Try to solve as many questions, write answers, try to add in those value enrichment points, be it the committee report, be it the recent statistical data that you can come out with, or you can also add in with the schemes, the relevant government schemes or policies which have been announced by the government in those relevant sectors. Whatsoever is the demand of the question, try to write in contextual manner. What is being asked, try to address that thing rather than just giving those overview of the things which are there. If the question is how is it improving, you need to know how is it improving, why is it not doing to do so. You need to improve, come out with the negative answer why this thing is not clicking, rather than just giving the introductory part. You have just chosen those words and you are writing those answers. So that this concludes whatsoever discussions in 3 sessions we had regarding the questions. First, related to the macroeconomy and mobilization of resources, employment and inflation related things. Second, it was all about agroeconomy, and third, the applied economics part. So thank you.